Hello and welcome. I hadn't intended to be talking about the Labour Party quite so soon, but what is that thing that's the opposite of covering yourself in glory? Whatever that is, that's what they've done. Again. The latest so-called scandal, I don't think it's a scandal, I think it's a disgusting revelation, goes along the following lines. Let me read you the headline from the Metro. All Labour MPs in Andrew Gwynn's WhatsApp group face punishment. What WhatsApp group, you may be wondering, and who's Andrew Gwynn? Andrew Gwynn is an MP for Gorton and Denton. And the article says, every member of a WhatsApp group in which a Labour MP made racist and sexist remarks about fellow MPs could face punishment, a minister has said. Now, we're going to look at some of those remarks in a bit more detail, because when you read headlines and articles that are in publications like the Metro, and in fact there was a similar thing written on the BBC, on their website, I think it loses a little bit in the translation, potentially. It makes it more anodyne. And I'm going to look at what the Daily Mail published, because they put some of these comments in a sort of graphic format, as if you were actually looking at the feed. I mean, it's not quite the same, but it kind of gives you the impression of what it must have been like to be in that WhatsApp group. And I think that's more powerful, because I think it brings home exactly what was being said and how gobsmackingly grim it is, just generally, but particularly given the source and who's in that WhatsApp group. Before we get there, let's remind ourselves about a couple of things. Number one, this article, and this I believe is from GB News. So Keir Starmer's trips abroad, this article's from a little while ago, cost British taxpayers £700,000 during his first 3 months as Prime Minister. The sum of the Labour leader's foreign flights cost £161,000, more than that of the combined total of his Tory predecessors Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, within the same time frame as PM. Starmer has also spent more time overseas in his first 6 months as PM than the three who came before him, the Mail and Sunday reports. He has been put on blast for his affinity for overseas travel, causing him to acquire the nickname Never Hear Keir. And I think when that nickname was first coined, it was almost kind of funny. But if you consider how worried people were before Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, and think about why they were worried in part, at least some people, because he didn't seem to represent anything. He seemed to flip-flop. Whatever the government could be criticised for, that's what Labour would do differently. So very much an easy target for them at that point in time. The Tories were, and the Tories, of course, had disgusted everybody. They were on their knees, they had had enough of them, they wanted change. But even in such a situation, people were still very wary about Keir Starmer. Their sixth sense, their intuition, who was this person, seemed a little bit authoritarian, a little bit blunt, not much charisma, not much of a personality. What did he want? His decisions not only flip-flopping, but appeared to be expedient. What was Starmerism? That didn't seem to exist. Oh, but it does exist. The flights, you see, they give you a clue, as does Keir. Where would you rather be, Parliament or Davos? Davos. Why? Because Keir is about power. He has a sense of entitlement. He wants to get where he wants to get, and where he wants to get is closer to the bigger levers of power, to hobnob with those who also have delusions of grandeur, who consider themselves to be very, very, very special indeed, to such an extent that they harbour thoughts and desires and visions of a one world government, and they're part of it. Maybe a one world bank, maybe a one world army. And years ago, I used to think that all sounded good, until I then realised that hold on, wouldn't that depend on who was actually in charge of all that and who would police the police? Because if the wrong people got into that type of power, you couldn't get them out again, and you would be subject to their whims. You'd have to hope that they were ethical and moral creatures. And I don't hold out much hope for that these days. So, in my opinion, this is at least partly where Keir's focus is. It's not in the UK. The population are kind of secondary to his vision, his messianic zeal about how the world should look, how countries should be shaped. It doesn't really matter as much about a national identity when you're going to be pulled together by a bunch of technocrats. And I think that people sensed quite a lot of that before he became Prime Minister. And since then, what have we seen? The party that promised to get rid of sleaze that would be there to support people. What have they done? Well, right out of the gates, they decided that it would be a good idea to freeze pensioners and also put some punitive demands on businesses, which didn't do the economy much good, did it? How is the economy looking? And why don't we punish the people who actually produce the food, or at least a lot of it, that we eat? What a great trifecta to begin. But hey, listen, all of that was fine because of the £22 billion black hole. Oh yes, remember? That was the sabre rattling, the shroud waving. If we don't do this, it's not because of us. We have to make these harsh decisions. And then I draw your attention to this little article, a snippet of it. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has said that worst economic inheritance since World War II. In other words, that's what she has picked up. I've inherited the worst economic situation since World War II, adding that the government has had to deal with a £22 billion black hole left by the Conservatives. However, Ms. Kuenssberg quickly pushed back on this in an analysis on the BBC website, where she pointed out that £9 billion of that much quoted black hole figure was due to the public sector pay rises above inflation which Labour granted.
When she walked through the door next door was to audit the books. What she found was a £22 billion black hole this year. Now, she had a choice: pretend it isn't there, walk past it, or deal with it.
Now,
I just want to deal with it.
I just want to stop you there. I just want to stop you there. On that 22 billion, I want everybody watching this to know and understand that nearly half of that 22 billion, £9 billion, comes from decisions that your government has made to give many public sector workers pay rises above inflation, including junior doctors getting 22% of an increase over 2 years. So again, when it comes to winter fuel allowance, that was a choice. It was a political decision for the reasons that you say. You want to sort out the economy, but how can you justify it to viewers who feel like it is an attack on some people who've worked hard all their lives? They're not wealthy, they don't have money to spare, and this year, if it's cold, they're going to be looking at the thermostat and wondering if they can pay their bills.
And I can recall speaking about this in July last year in London and saying, well, hopefully Rachel Reeves will, open the books up and show us the workings. But we never did get to the bottom of it. This has had to be prized out. And kudos to Ms. Kuenssberg for pointing it out. So what have we got? Somebody who likes to fly and travel, Keir, and the 22 billion being held up as an excuse for the decisions that, well, they didn't actually have to make. Diane Abbott herself, I made a video about this, said, but these are choices. They didn't have to do that to the pensioners or the farmers, or penalise businesses in that way. So who are these people? Again, I come back to this question. What is the game? Are we simply pawns? Are we simply the serfs who are just there to allow them to do what they want? They're heating bills paid, their expenses paid, their more than one accommodations paid for. But we had that with the Tories. We knew that's what they were like. But Labour positioned themselves differently. And this is the thing that I don't think people will forget. I think they will remember this. It's the hypocrisy. It's the lies. It's the subterfuge. It's the misdirection that really sticks in people's craw. And now, what do we have? This holier than thou party. Well, again, of course, I'm not talking about everyone in it. I'm only talking about a few. Thank goodness. Let's look at this little graphic. And this graphic is from the Daily Mail. I'll start at the top. A non-Labour supporting pensioner writes to Labour councillor David Sedgwick, a member of the Trigger Me Timbers WhatsApp group. This is a WhatsApp group in question. And they're asking him, David, about bin collections. Dear Mr. Sedgwick, whilst I am in no way responsible for your re-election, but harsh, but fair enough, I thought this would be an appropriate time to contact you with regard to bin collections. My husband and I are both 72 years old. Sedgwick puts the letter on the WhatsApp group. You've got to ask yourself why. Bit of fun. A wizard wheeze, a jolly jape. But anyway, it's there. Minutes later, Gwyn, this is Andrew Gwyn, responds with a despicable mock reply, which reads, Dear resident, F your bins. I'm re-elected and without your vote. Screw you. P.S. Hopefully you'll have croaked it by the all-outs. In other words, by the time we get back to voting again. Hopefully you'll have croaked it. It's charming. It isn't that? Then we'll go down. In another exchange, Gwyn and colleagues make anti-Semitic remarks while discussing a Labour Party meeting in the MP's constituency. Bizarrely, one councillor asks if an American Jewish psychologist, Marshall Rosenberg, will attend. Will Marshall Rosenberg be there as well? Andrew Gwyn. No, he sounds too militaristic and too Jewish. Is he Mossad? I mean, what the actual heck? Earlier, Gwyn made light of anti-Semitism in an inappropriate quip. Andrew Gwyn. Geoffrey the Giraffe says, don't be nasty to the Jews. We'll cross to the right of that little section I've been reading. On another occasion, Gwyn and others mocked veteran Labour MP Diane Abbott when she became the first black parliamentarian to represent their party at Prime Minister's questions. So they mocked veteran MP, Labour MP, Diane Abbott. Who's ready for Diane at PMQs? Prime Minister's questions. Andrew Gwyn. Yep, because it's Black History Month, apparently. Was David Lammy not available? I'd also take the corpse of Bernie Grant. Again, an explanatory note on the graphic. Bernie Grant was a high-profile black Labour MP who died years earlier. It kind of beggars belief, this stuff. AG, Andrew Gwyn, or Desmond Swain, ... Justin Trudeau, a Tory MP who caused controversy by blackening his face for fancy dress, and the Canadian PM, Prime Minister, who did the same, Justin Trudeau. Bottom left, the group also poked fun at a local resident who was campaigning for more cycle lanes. In one particularly nasty comment, Gwyn joked that he hoped he'd be knocked over by a bin lorry. Lost the will. That Nick is something else. Andrew Gwyn. I had positive visions of him getting mown down by an Elsa Waste HGV while he's cycling to the Fallowfield Loop. We couldn't be that lucky. So, these are the people that are there to serve. These are the people who care. These are the people who are part of the party of the people. These are the people who were voted in directly or indirectly because everybody was so disappointed, to say the least, with the Tories. But as I've said before, at least with the Tories, you knew what to expect. You knew what you were going to get. This crowd, subterfuge seems to have been the name of the game for a lot of them. I come back to a nest of vipers. Time, I think, that we had a rethink about who needs to be in charge of this country. And maybe it is time, somehow, legally, to trigger another election. Because as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people in that Labour Party are simply not fit for purpose. And that's putting it very politely.